Hello and good morning and welcome to the Evolution of a Property Business podcast, episode 5, with me, your host, Sam Watterson. And before you say, hang on a minute, he's wearing exactly the same t-shirt as he wore in that previous podcast. I'm actually recording these back to back, so I'm not wearing the same clothes every day. So I do wear clean t-shirts every day. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by Vann Vogstad of Coho to talk all things software and property today. So Vann, if you'd like to give everybody a quick introduction to you and talk a little bit about your company and what you guys do.
So well, I'm Vann. Shouldn't have said that. You've already said my name. I am a kind of tech startup person. I don't know how to describe that stuff, but I've had 2 tech startups previously and was fortunate enough to exit both of them, which let me build up a little pot of money to throw into this crazy venture of trying to build HMO property management software. And kind of, I won't go too deep into it, but the reason is when I was in my early 20s, I actively sought to live in a shared house, which sounds pretty crazy when I look at all the shared houses, not all of them. When I look at a lot of like what the standard shared houses at the moment, people don't generally choose to live in, but I wanted that like TV-like experience that's almost scripted. And I was probably extremely naive, but was very fortunate and actually achieved it. And from that moment, I've really thought that is something that should be available to other people. So so 10 years or 12 years on from that, I'm now attempting to reshape how shared homes are managed and found. And that's kind of where Coho is born from.
Yeah. So anybody who's listening to this or watching this, who's read the description, has seen, Vann Vogstad and is hearing Vann talk with a fluent British accent. You're actually English, aren't you? So tell us the story behind the name.
Yeah, so my wife's Canadian. She's half Italian, half Norwegian, and her name's Norwegian. And when we got married, I suggested that we take her name, and she just laughed it off. So we were Jones for ages, for about 8 years. It was actually when I sold the last company and I saw the press release online, and it was like, so my first name's Andy as well. Right. It's going to sound like a whole fraud now. Van's my middle name. When I saw Andy Jones, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that is the most boring name I've ever seen. And like, no offense to the 4 other Andy Joneses I literally have on LinkedIn. But it was just terrible. Yeah. So I was like, really, let's change to your name. And we did. And then I started using Vann as my middle name.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a lot different.
Yeah, brilliant. So tell us a little bit about Coho then. What does Coho do and who's it designed for?
So who's it designed for? I'd say, okay, so what's it do? So when we set out, we realized that at the moment, a lot of HMO managers are they're struggling to focus on the service because the operation is so bloody difficult. Like I think people outside of HMOs don't realize just how difficult it is in comparison to like a single let. Like it may both be one property, but you've got, let's say, 6 tenants on average in them. And that's essentially 6 tenancy agreements, 6 rents that you're tracking. But even worse, you've also got 6 different relationships, or 36 times, no, I don't know what the multiple thing, like loads of little relationships in there. So there's the arguments that go with it, there's the extra regulation. Like it makes sense why people just struggle to then focus on how do we provide this as a service. And also when we compare single lets to HMOs, people in single lets, like they just want a house. They don't want you're not like part of their life. You're just providing the house and taking the rent. But when people move into HMOs, it's different. It's like a more short-term thing. So the service is actually way more important. So when we started looking at this industry and what we need to solve, we kind of saw that, okay, the service is a huge factor that people just don't have the time to do. And why don't they have the time? Well, a lot of the people are using software that was built for single lets, for something entirely different. I mean, on the surface, yeah, it might look the same. They both have doors and windows and take rent, but software built for single lets that was then adapted to work for HMOs. And a lot of the time, that's like they've looked in the database and gone, an HMO, we can consider that's like a block of flats, and each flat is a room. So that kind of works. So what we set out to do was, okay, let's save people's time by building software that's actually designed for them with their HMO business. And sorry, I'm monologuing here. I didn't prepare this. The main thing we kind of noticed with that is HMO managers, to achieve what they need to do, they're pretty much using kind of 10 plus pieces of software. It's like communication through WhatsApp, maintenance through FixFlow, DocuSign for the tenancy agreements. Then they'll be using, a light PMS to actually pull everything together. But there's so many little bits of kit like Go Cardless for the direct debits or whatever. And none of these things talk to each other. So you pull someone in on a tenancy agreement. You've got Vabu for your tenant reward system. So you go into Vabu and you're letting them know you've got a new tenant. You're going to DocuSign and uploading the contracts. You go to Go Cardless and set a new mandate. Like, all of these things make it an absolute ball ache to just onboard a new tenant.
Yeah.
So the initial mission that we're doing is going through trying to make it an all-in-one piece of software. So you onboard someone and as much of that is done as possible. So we're integrating with like really top level things that we're never going to build ourselves, like Help Me Fix, where the dream then is that instead of, someone onboards through Coho and then you have to go to Help Me Fix and let them know you've got a new tenant. They onboard through Coho and we push that tenant to Help Me Fix, so you don't have to let them know. Like that's the idea, that it just all hangs together. Yeah. And that 95% of the time you're kind of doing things that don't require a lot of thought, and we want to take that effort away so you can focus on that 5% of times when people have gone mental and someone's nicked a pancake, as I saw in that other Facebook group. And you can spend the time growing the business and focusing on the service and getting ahead.
One thing we found with our letting agency is we use what I call a legacy system. And the legacy system is really good for managing the tenancy, processing the rent, start dates, finish dates, when your safe certificates are coming up for renewal, booking viewings, advertising the properties. But there's so much of the process that it misses. The communication, even the business generation, completely unthought of in the software. And there's no flexibility to connect that software with other things that do the job better. So what we've actually done is we keep our fundamental basic property management software, but then we've started to build our own system through a CRM system, which we use for business development, speedy communications and things like that. And then that CRM system is designed to be connected to other things that all integrate completely seamlessly. Whereas the software we're using, to be honest, I signed up for it in 2015, and I think it's exactly the same. There's not any development, and there's also a real lack of willingness to connect with other software and to have an open API where developers can create something that would make it better. And I just think that's such an outdated and archaic way of thinking about it. So what you're doing is really interesting, because also, like you say, it's all heavily based around single lets. So what we have to do is we just have to sort of almost hack the system a little bit and create everything that we can. So when did you set up Coho then?
I think it's 2018 or 2019. I can never quite remember.
And with this podcast being all about the evolution of a property business, so when you first started Coho, then were you like the main? So you by trade a software developer, and you were developing the software, and then have you advanced now onto sort of managing a team? Is that right?
Yeah. So in my last business, the last startup, I was essentially COO. I was kind of like the man behind the main guy. And that's generally the position I'm kind of comfortable with, not necessarily being in the spotlight, but having the influence to move things. And when we started Coho, I kind of felt like, okay, I think I need to step up now, and this is the one that I need to lead and stop kind of wanting someone else to kind of take that. So it's not necessarily a natural position for me. I think now it kind of makes sense that it is. But yeah, I still develop a lot of the software myself. We've grown from, there was 2 of us to start with. We quickly moved to 3, then 4, and then in the past sort of 6-7 months we've gone to like 15. So there's a
or just a team throughout the business?
Team in general, yeah. Developers, I think we're at like 4 developers. Yeah, so it's been a really interesting progression how it's ramped up.
Who did you add next then? So you got your developers, or you were the developer. What roles did you add next to the business, and what was the intention there?
Yeah, so me and my co-founder Liam, we're both quite similar. We went to college together. We're both developers. We've got slightly different skill sets, but ultimately it's kind of like, different flavor jelly babies sort of thing. Yeah. So the next person we added was a COO who is very different to me. He's 55 now. He's more of that kind of like firm hand with things. Then as we're starting to get to market, we realized between us, we aren't great at the commercials and the sales. I'm not a natural salesperson. I do okay because I think people see that I'm quite genuine with it, but I'm not that kind of dickhead in a suit with bright white teeth coming in sort of thing. Not that we've got anyone like that on the team either, but what I mean is
a nerd in a hoodie, that kind of
yeah. So the next person we got very early on was Helen, who's done like an incredible job at getting our name out there and connecting with people. And then from there, we're really good at the tech. Like that's really where our strength is. So we focus more around the marketing and the sales, and we padded out that. And then it's only been in the last few months that we've started to pad out the development team, because my time is just getting shorter and shorter on development. So we've padding out the development team now to keep the product moving forward fast.
Good. I can't help but thinking of the program. I think it was on HBO, Silicon Valley.
Oh, I love that show.
It was absolutely brilliant, and it gave me such a sort of window into what goes on with a tech startup, because it's completely alien to me. I'm a user of tech.
Yeah.
I did a degree in business and IT. So my degree was kind of, how does business use IT to get an advantage? So everything I've always done in my business is about, coming up with a solution using tech that's out there. But in terms of actually designing the tech and developing the tech, it's completely alien to me. And, when I look from a distance at the sort of startup model, they kind of go through rounds of funding. So have you had to do that yourself? Have you had to go out and raise funds, and how have you found that experience?
Yeah, I mean, we were quite fortunate in that we could stop that for as long as possible, which was really important to me because I have a vision and I really want to carry out that vision. And often companies, they go in with a vision, but then they get investors on who, let's say for our company, if I didn't have any money, it would have been the case of, okay, this is what I really want to do. And then an investor might go, oh, rent collection is quite lucrative. Start doing rent collection. And then it's like, okay, let's do the rent collection. But then this is what I really want to do. And they'll go, oh, but that's a bit of a waste of time. Do more rent collection. And then before you know it, you've got a rent collection company. So we were quite fortunate in that we were able to really build out the product and the vision before we had to take any money. And then last year we were approached by 2 different venture capital companies, which is really good. I mean, it's kind of, first of all, people rarely get approached by venture capital companies. And secondly, 2, at our level, when we were kind of pre-revenue, was really nice. And we had an offer from one, and I just felt like they didn't match our vision. Yeah. So we turned it down, which was a pretty scary moment. But then the second one came in with an offer, and they were absolutely perfect in every way. Like they completely understood what we're trying to do. And with them, we also had a load of our customers invest as angel investors in Coho, which was like a really nice thing to see as well. So yeah, we've been through a round of investment. We're actually kind of looking at another right now. Not that there's any space for anyone else. It's kind of all the people who are in it are putting more in, but it's just to keep accelerating the vision. But just going back to that Silicon Valley thing, I actually find that quite accurate as a show. Yeah, one little anecdote. There's an episode of it where someone's talking about investing in the company and they meet them and they're hearing about the product. And I know for sure that I've had people do that with me, meet me to hear from a sales perspective so they can feed it back to competitors and stuff like that. It's fine. And I've never tried to get an advantage through secrecy or anything. I'm very open with things, because if your only advantage is that people aren't quite aware of what you're doing, then you're pretty effed later on.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so in my last company, we had someone that wanted to talk about investing, and we met them in this really expensive hotel, and there was about 10 of them. And we're talking through what we're doing and stuff. And they were making notes, and it was becoming quite evident that like they were there for different purposes. And then about 4 months later, they threw up a competitor that that was like, it was terrible. But and then about 9 months after that, they came back and they were like, yeah, so we tried to compete and failed, can we invest? That was quite funny.
Did they invest?
No, but they were in the mix when we were looking to exit. They were one of the ones talking about buying. They weren't one of the ones that bought in the end. So but that was an episode of Silicon Valley as well.
And that was a previous company, was it?
Yeah, my last one, yeah.
Okay, so am I right in thinking that the seed capital for Coho came from selling, exiting on a previous tech company? So
yeah, we exited kind of two at the same time, which was quite nice. One was to a sort of top 100 fintech company. It was a Thai-based company, and from the start to finish of my involvement in that, I didn't go to Thailand once, which was a weird one. And the acquisition for my last one, which was in sports betting, I'm not a sports better. So when people have kind of asked, do you invest in properties, or like, what do you know about properties? I've always taken it as, actually, my advantage is that I don't know anything about properties. And like, it sounds stupid, but it's kind of like, if you know a lot about HMO management and then you try and build an HMO management system, you're building out your experience. And that's like just your experience. And if someone else says, this is my experience, you'll probably see that and go, they're probably wrong, because I haven't seen that. But in reality, we've all had different experiences, and I can kind of go in as a blank sheet and sort of absorb knowledge from everybody and try and pull that together and figure out what the right path is. And it's really scary launching something like that, because I'm literally launching something to a load of experts as someone who doesn't really know anything. And there's that moment where it's like, okay, now it's out in the wild. Are people going to go, this is complete shit? Yeah. And thankfully it wasn't, but it is a bit nerve-wracking.
The previous business then was the previous company was a sports betting company. What was the other one? Because you said you exited too.
Yeah, it was kind of like an event discovery and ticketing company. We sold Jimmy Carr's tour tickets in Bangkok and stuff like that.
And you started those platforms from scratch, grew them, and then sold.
Yeah.
Each time sort of scaling the size of the operation. And
yeah, kind of each time it was more about improving my understanding of business and strategy and how you achieve things. And like, completely honestly, I looked at building Coho literally sort of 10, 12 years ago.
Right.
I was approached by my landlord at the time, and he said, let's build a property management system for HMOs. And apart from a few red flags in the relationship, I just wasn't ready at the time. If I'd have done it, it would have failed. And you don't want your good idea to be the first one, because you're not going to execute it well, and you only get one chance at these things. And to be honest, it also probably was a little bit early back then, sort of 10 or 12 years ago. I don't know, maybe things could have been different, but I mean, things have really improved in the past sort of 5-6 years. I think the market could have been too small to even make it a success back then.
It's more professional now. And, HMO in the past was where someone put a bed in the living room and called it HMO. Whereas now you have companies like ourselves who specifically design HMOs from the ground up for that market. So what would you say was your inspiration for setting up Coho?
Yeah, so it was pretty much my experience after university with all of my friends moving to London, and me sort of living with my parents, working a job, just going to work, maybe sometimes going out after work, but it wasn't like a particularly fun life then. And I was like, this can't be it. And then you see these things on TV with kind of 4 people living together having fun. Someone I really like at the time, Danny Wallace, he met a guy called Dave Gorman in a house share, and like all of the adventures they went on with Google Whack, for anyone who knows any of that stuff. And I just thought like that would be fun. So I actively like sought that, can I find a house share of people who are just like me? And as I said before, it's probably naive to think that in retrospect, because it's quite hard to find that sort of thing. But I landed like spot on with it and moved into a really, really good house of people that I massively got on with. And at the time I had friends in the area, because I didn't move away. I was literally just moving kind of like 5 minutes down the road into it. So I had friends around the area still. And I said to them, like, why don't you live in a shared house? And the reaction was like, nope. And one guy had tried to, and he had like a horrible experience. Someone else went to view one, and it was like, he told me at the time that he didn't meet any of the housemates. It was kind of a quick shuffle through the house, kitchen, here's the living room. And when he looked in the living room, there was just a guy sitting there in a trench coat and boxers. And he was like, yeah, I don't want to live here. But it was really weird because like I hadn't experienced anything like that. So them telling me that was their experience was kind of probably the same as me telling them what my experience was. And they were so worlds apart. And it felt like my experience was like a proper win-win. It was great for the landlord, who didn't have to do that much. It was great for all the tenants. Like, we would pay more because we valued that lifestyle. We weren't just paying for the house. We were essentially paying because we're going on nights out every Thursday to walk about. We had a football team, we had a dodgeball team, we had poker nights, we had house parties. Like, that's something that you actually value as a lifestyle thing. And that's kind of what most HMOs just don't get. So yeah, so my inspiration for it is, how can I, for my 4 kids as they grow up, how can I create a world where that is a common occurrence, where they can actually decide, do I want to be on my own? Like, am I someone who wants to be on my own most of the time and just meet people? Or do I want to have my own space, but be around like-minded people that I'm close with? So yeah, that's why I'm doing it.
It's almost like a positive choice rather than I'm down on my luck. The only option I've got is a HMO. It's actually more of a desirable choice. One thing that you reminded me of then, actually, you made a very good point, was when I was at school, I was going to do business studies at GCSE level, and one of the girls in the year above who was on the school bus says, don't do business studies, it's rubbish. So I didn't do business studies at GCSE, but I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. But based on her experience and her advice, I didn't do it. So then when I went to do A levels at college, I went and did business studies. And then I was like, of all the subjects I've ever studied in my life, this is the only one where I feel like I know all the answers before we've started.
Yeah.
I've always been destined to run my own business, and I run my own business now. And I just think, God, if I'd done GCSE business, I might have done really well in that, and it might have ignited a bit of flair. But because I was basing my decisions on someone else's experience based on what, I don't know what they're doing now. They could be working in a cafe.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it was a really interesting point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know sometimes I've kind of wound you up a little bit on Facebook because there's this thing about co-living in the industry, which is what you're describing, and I kind of say, well, co-living is just the same as a HMO. What's the difference? And I know it can rile people up. So, coming straight from the horse's mouth, what would you say would be the main difference between a HMO and co-living HMO?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I want to address there first of all is that part of the problem is the people who are at the forefront of co-living are doing it with like really expensive refurbs and like proper like Instagrammable buildings, and that's like great, and there's a market for that. But it's also making a load of people almost like have the backup against it and feel like they're not part of the club. And it's like, well, that's not what I'm building. So I am against that, because we just naturally have an aversion to that. When we feel like we're on the outside of something, then we have an aversion to it. Where I lived was nothing like these places. It was like very much an HMO. It wasn't a nice looking place. Like, it was dusty on the floor. My parents would put the shoes on to come in, sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's no Instagram didn't exist, but if had it have, there wouldn't have been pictures of it there. But it was very much co-living. And I think the thing is, when we've got an HMO market of people who are focused on price, to get the people who aren't focused on price, you're really having to kind of really go above and beyond to make it really clear that this is a trendy place. And that has then kind of become synonymous with co-living, and it's just not true. Like, co-living is the service, and these places almost certainly are also providing that service. It's just people can't see that from an Instagram post where they see all these nice pictures. So what I consider co-living is, yes, obviously it's an HMO, even though HMO is like a UK word, it's happening all over the world. So it's more that the government defines this type of building as an HMO. To me, co-living is where people are kind of like, what's the word? Like, intentionally living together. They're not subjected to living together. It's not that I can't afford to live on my own, so I will put up with living with others to have cheaper rent. To me, co-living is that I am living with others sort of like intentionally, and I'm embracing that living with others, not just awkwardly passing by someone in the kitchen.
Yeah, so it's about creating a community, I guess, and designing the house in a way that people are encouraged to interact with each other and spend time together. You know, I don't kind of use the buzzword co-living, probably because of the same reasons you do, but we try and design all ours with a co-living philosophy. You know, in Leeds, the council very much want communal rooms, and I know tenants don't necessarily use the living room. It's really important for me that we have one, and we always put a big flat screen telly on there and comfortable sofas, because we want to make sure the tenants can go in there and spend time and get to know each other. You know, kitchens with breakfast bars where they can all sit together and have that kind of community feeling, and go to the pub together as well. I'm not a fan of trendy HMOs, and the reason why is because something that looks amazing today, in 3-4 years, is going to look out of date. So what we always do is we go for stuff that's quite functional, so that if we want to change the colours of the paint on the walls, we can, or if we want to change it, we can change it without having to do a major refurb. So sometimes when I see all this like industrial, like copper bars and everything, I think that looks great today, but next year that's going to look like last season. And if you think about how often wine bars are getting refurbed because they're getting out of date and changed, it's kind of that same philosophy. So I see it, and I think these look great, but then in reality, you know, you wouldn't live in somewhere that looks like the inside of a cardboard box, or, you know, a street food stall, would you? So
I mean, the other thing is that, like, you have to look at what the alternative is for these people. Like, if you're even in the most trendy HMOs, it's still cheaper than single lets. So like, it's kind of like, okay, you can live in this really trendy place, or you're going to live in a pretty bland 1-bed studio. So like, yeah, I think they're really good for like brand building for people, but it is all about the function. And I don't want to sound for one second like the people who are doing the trendy ones aren't doing anything functional, because I know they're really kind of up on the game with that as well. It's just kind of like, you see the trendy stuff, like that's the bit that jumps out at you. But yeah, I think the functional part is by far the most important bit. And you mentioned about how people won't necessarily use the living room, and that's true. When I first came into this, I remember seeing something, some figures about why people choose HMOs. And if I was to guess, I would have said that 75% of people choose HMOs to be around other people. And the figures were more like 20% of people do that, 80% of people do it purely on price, if not more. And I remember reading that at the time and thinking, that's not true, is it? I completely acknowledge that's completely true now. And it's just because the market hasn't quite matured. Like, at the moment, the landlords are recognizing the service and they're starting to edge it that way. And it's because like it takes the product to exist for the market to exist almost. It's an evolving thing where people are gradually realizing that's a way, landlords are increasingly realizing that's what they should be doing, and it does just snowball then. And that's what we're banking on, that snowball happens to the point that people are like, okay, I now have two options, live on my own or live with others. But it's not a kind of, I can't afford it, I'm just going to live with others.
Yeah, cool. So the next question is, what are you looking to achieve with Coho? What's your kind of 5-year plan with the software?
So yeah, I really want it to get very big. I'm always cautious of not wanting to sound like completely ridiculous, because you hear a lot of people in startups that's like, look, I've made this new pen. It's going to be $1 billion company because people can write with it in a slightly different way. And it's just sort of like, mate, it's a pen. So I'm always a bit cautious of trying to sound like, what do I want to achieve? But we really want to become pretty much the only choice for anyone with HMOs for management systems. That's the short-term view. But we're pretty much, I've always been told not to say it too publicly, but F it. We're going head to head with Spare Room as a place to find properties. And the reason is, at the moment, Spare Room is, here is a property and a location and a rent amount. Whereas what we have with Coho, we bring tenants into the system as equals to the manager. They are invited to the house, but they have their own Coho account. And with that, we ask them to provide some information about themselves, their job, their age, their interests. So what we show on Coho is, here's the property and here are the 6 people that you'll live with and here are their interests. So if you're an introvert and here's a house full of people who like going out, probably avoid this one. And that's good for the person moving in, the people who live there, and the manager, because that is a disaster waiting to happen, a short tenancy. So we plan to go head to head with Spare Room and start to be the place where people find those compatible properties. We are looking to bring in everything you need to do as a manager to have the house function. So we're building out our finance module at the moment that should be launched hopefully before the summer, which will have all automated rent reconciliation and credit control and settlement building, profitability reports, so you can understand where you're doing well and where you're not doing as well. And then going towards the sort of longer term plans, we completely plan to launch this outside of the UK. I've been quite vocal in the co-living scene, and I was previously involved in co-live. And I really believe that UK is kind of at the forefront of all of this. So like America is a little bit scattered with their shared living, and Europe has quite different models again. UK seem like we have the most advanced place. And I think it's time for kind of the British company to go to America and help them sort of get to where I think it can get to. So yeah, we'll be looking to launch in America sometime in future, and the rest of the world. So we really kind of want to be the Airbnb of shared living.
Okay, so Coho, can we advertise rooms at the moment, or is that just something that you're looking?
No, you can, yeah, you can, but we don't promote that really at the moment. We get quite a lot of people come to it, but even with quite a lot of people, like we've got quite a lot of units on as well. But if you divide the number of units we've got by every city in the country and then by the budgets, like there's still not enough. You need like sort of 20,000-30,000 rooms to be active at any time for it to be worthwhile. And we're getting to that point. But yeah, you can advertise it, and we allow you to add the floor plans, the videos, virtual tours. It automatically pulls in people who are your tenants, and we'll also help push it to other portals like Facebook Marketplace and Spare Room.
That's good. So you can basically go head to head with the portals and Spare Room.
Yeah, and we act as that place that like start your whole viewing listing process within Coho. So the leads get pulled into Coho for you then to push out. Like we handle all the communication, because people kind of make that mistake. I'll call it a mistake. Sorry for anyone who's offended by this, but make the mistake of sharing their kind of like WhatsApp details with people at viewings, because at that point they're always going to be messaging you through WhatsApp. And WhatsApp is like, it's a sort of like instant messenger and you're not their friend and you probably have a team around you, you don't want them messaging you at 10 o'clock and expecting that you're going to reply and seeing that you've read it and then going, well, you've read it, why haven't you replied? Like, it's a business you're running, and communication, in my opinion, shouldn't be happening via something like WhatsApp. Even WhatsApp business isn't suitable for it. So we kind of put a place for all of the communication to be centralized during the viewings, the onboarding, and then it just naturally progresses into, now when you have issues, they're already used to using the Coho messaging system and logging things that way. And also, while I'm whipping on WhatsApp, it's kind of like if they do get used to that, they'll message you 3 messages saying the shower's broken, there's a dripping tap, and the window's drafty.
Yeah.
But that's 3 different issues, and now you have to take those and log them somewhere else and ask them for pictures and then pull those from WhatsApp and put them elsewhere. Whereas if from the very start they had that place where it's like, go here and log an issue, log 3 different issues, and those 3 things can be tracked independently.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, we kind of see it as like you start the journey from within Coho. You add all the information in Coho. It then gets pushed out to the other portals. Leads get pulled in, and it also gets pushed out to Coho for what it's worth at the moment.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Like, I make sure that tenants don't have my number because they'll abuse it.
Yeah.
They don't really have any boundaries with letting agents. I don't really work within the lettings team, but I know people will just abuse a mobile number or the landline sometimes just because they've got it. I'm almost tempted to take out the phones and get everyone to report things through our website, because it can be logged. Because when people are ringing up and going, oh, can you do this? And then the phone goes out and someone else rings up. It's kind of like millions of little things that need to be remembered and uploaded, and they're never going to get done efficiently unless you got everything stored in a central system where you can look at your system and go, these 10 things need doing, that's done, I'll tick that off. I always say to my staff, the system should do the thinking for you.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. If you have to remember anything in your business, you've made a mistake. You eliminate memory. If someone rings me and says, can you do something for me? I'm like, send me an email. Because that email is my trigger to do it when I'm in front of a computer. If you're just asking me to do something, it's probably not going to get done. And
then this concept about like, you really want to work yourself out of the business. And if everything's with you and all the processes is in your head, what happens when you want to take a holiday? You're then panicked because you're like, oh, do the people know what to do here? And then if you want to scale the team, you want to open another branch or something like that. Like, how do you do that when it's not all systemized? Yeah. Forgot the right word there. Systemized. Yeah.
That's what I was saying to my staff the other day. I was saying, if I have to do something, we have a problem, because I've only got so many hours in the week. And if I've got to do it, then we have a limit on how much can get done. If I can teach someone else how to do it, then it comes down to recruitment, right? Yeah. We need that doing, right? Recruit someone new to do that, add to the team, get an admin person, build out that. If it's just me doing everything, we'll always just grind to a halt regularly at different intervals about different things.
And PropTech's kind of really left an open goal for companies like us there, because I think, like you said, that you've had yours since 2015, kind of PropTech's behind the times anyway, generally. Like, there is some really good companies kind of on the way up, but it's kind of for the most part, property management systems are a database for your data, and like other industries have moved on. It's no longer about the database, it's about the like intelligence center. It's kind of like the stuff goes in and you're just sort of pushing things along as and when it's needed for the bit that you know.
Yeah.
And PropTech's, a lot of it feels more like, here's a spreadsheet, do with it what you need. We've put the headings in for you.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is move away from that to that kind of, okay, this kicks off this, which kicks off this, and maybe this is out of the normal parameters. So now we need someone to come in and make sure things are okay and accept something or push it forwards.
Yeah, almost like quality control rather than actually doing the process.
Yeah. And also, like, PropTech in general, they haven't massively cared about the looks and the feel of things. And I think it's probably because a lot of people sell to big agencies, and I think there's just kind of a different mentality with making those big sales. And our focus early on, which was a really risky one, and we had people say, don't do that. But I've never been a big believer of like go for the big contracts to secure your company. I prefer the go for the smaller people who are really like on the ground and at the forefront and understanding what they need.
Yeah.
And even though each sale won't push you forward that much because it's going to be, you know, £100 or something, you'll build a really robust product around like cutting edge thoughts and the opinions of people and what they actually need. And then if you really build something well, you make those big sales later on, and you're not at the mercy of the people who buy the product and are making up, say, 40% of your revenue.
Yeah.
Instead, we can focus on it being a really good product and hope to attract those contracts.
Your business as well. If you've got 40% of your income from one customer and something goes wrong with that customer, it can have a massive impact.
Mm-hmm.
I try and make sure that we don't work too much with any one client. I need to be in a position where I can tell anyone I work with to do one and not feel the pain. If I've got to go home and think, I can't lose that client, then all of a sudden the tail wags the dog. And what I found is, because I'm now very, very much of the opinion that this is how we do it, it's my way or the highway. We don't work with everyone. You can work with us or you can go somewhere else. Our business is so much better and so much smoother, and the customers that do value what we do and value our time and our expertise, it gets such a better service because we're not getting distracted by the people that are only caring about themselves. So in your sort of, as an outsider looking into the world of HMOs, how have you found the standard of accommodation, and how have you seen that change over time? Have you seen like it evolve, the HMO market?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's quite easy to find yourself in a bubble where you're only seeing good things and ignore that there's a lot of crap going on. But at the same time, it's very easy for people to only see that side and only see what you're seeing on the news. And, you know, a kind of 4-bed house is just being converted into a 14-bed thing with 28 people in it. You know, like that's not what HMOs are. Like, we're seeing incredible people, like people who really care about the service and the offering that they're putting forward. And to be honest, like a little segue, but that's why we're doing the HMO Awards, because we really want to change the perception of what HMOs are. Like, it's not just some dodgy house full of refugees and someone's making a bit of money on it. It's not that, you know, bedroom in a living room, bed in a living room kind of thing. We want to kind of show, kind of like celebrate all of the people who are doing great things and hold them up as here are people that aren't just doing things for Instagram and they're not making a loss, that they have a very robust business because they're doing it this way. And we want them to be the people who are thought of when someone thinks HMO manager, not the ones who are getting the 40 grand fines because they taped up one of the doors. Yeah,
definitely. So tell me about the HMO Awards then. I know this is something that's quite new. Talk to me about that. You know, explain what it is and how it works, and how anybody listening to this can get involved.
Yeah, so Coho won an award last year. Thank you. I'm letting everyone applaud. Coho won an award last year for prop tech, and I was in one of those massive ballroom things in a tuxedo. I looked like a dickhead, but it was one of those like full of loads of agents, and pretty much no one around was doing anything related to HMOs. I was pretty much the only HMO-y sort of person there. And I said to the organizers after, why don't you have some HMO categories and sort of celebrate those people who were doing good things there? And they were of the mindset of like, well, normal agents can do HMOs and they can be accounted for there. But it's kind of like, yeah, but HMOs it's also kind of niche. Like, people who do HMOs, they're probably like specialize in it. They do single lets as well, but they specialize in HMOs. You compare in apples with oranges, and I feel like those people aren't really ever going to win an award. And that kind of stuck with me a little bit of like, yeah, it feels like there isn't really a place for these HMO managers to to get that marketing collateral, they need to help get themselves customers. There's someone on the high street that's got all these awards in the windows, but they don't have any of the awards in the windows because they're not invited to these events. And pretty much with everything in life, if I'm not happy about something, I don't sit by and tut. I end up wasting a load of my own time to try and rectify it. And we came up with the HMO Awards, which is a time for recognizing all the successes in HMOs for the people who are specializing in HMOs. And the way people can have a look, you can go to HMOawards.com, and there's a holding page there at the moment where you can put in your email address and we'll keep you updated. There's a Facebook group. If you just search HMO Awards, we'll be revealing a lot more very soon about it. But we are going for quite a different vibe. So I don't really like the tuxedo thing. I'm not sure anyone really does. I mean, it's okay as a bit of a novelty thing, but Helen and I were kind of talking about our ideas, and we would end up having the best wedding together because we were just completely aligned. Like everything that she wanted was exactly what I wanted, and vice versa. We want to go for that more relaxed vibe, a place where you can feel yourself and you can network with like-minded people around the country, because that's another problem. There's not a lot of ways for people around the country to share their experiences in HMOs, like, because it's specialist. If you go to an HMO meetup, you're probably there with your competitor, and are you gonna share like your experience with them? I mean, maybe, but instead, if you've got someone from like Brighton talking to someone in Manchester, they can a lot more comfortably be open about the challenges and share what works well without feeling like they're leaving the goal open. So we want to like create that environment. And also we're putting on like TED style talks. So instead of it being big exhibition before, where you just have that awkward standing there hoping someone looks at your stand, we think what people really want is real people giving talks about their experiences and things that are working well. So we're going to have talks on the day, a lot of networking. The awards are almost just the kind of the little bit in the middle, maybe. And then we're going to go for the more food truck style vibe, that sort of like trendy modern food trucks, as opposed to sit down meal where it's literally just a little piece of potato and a carrot slithered on top. So that's what the awards is all about. It's a time we're going with celebrate, learn. Oh, I should know that tagline. I'm going to get shouted at by the marketing team.
Don't worry. Well, I'm
celebrate, learn, and grow. That's it.
So I'm in anyway. It sounds amazing. So just looking back at the sort of evolution of your career, then you worked in the 2 startups previously and then exited, and then Coho, you become like the main guy. So were you kind of an employee on the first one, and then almost like a sort of sub partner on the second one, and then you transition to being the sort of Richard from Pied Piper of Silicon Valley for and what have been your biggest struggles throughout your sort of development?
So I started off just as a developer, and I was sort of like 22 at my first job, and I couldn't progress fast enough salary wise for where I felt I could get to. And like in school, I was pretty much very average grades, middle management, top sort of prospects in life. But I realized when I was working that actually I'm pretty decent and I can progress quite quick. So I had a job. I had to leave that job to get another job. I asked for a pay rise, but it was during the pay freeze, and they were like, "Oh, here's some good news. We're going to give you an extra 2,000." But it's like, I am as good as the people who are on sort of 10,000 more. So we ended up leaving that and just accepting that I pretty much can't work for other people at the moment because I'm progressing too fast. I'm not given the freedom. So I went into contracting, and instantly massive, like 3 times pay increase and a load more respect. People start listening to me and stuff like that. But then I never would have considered myself as creative. Like, I'm terrible at art and design and all of that sort of stuff, but I'm really creative from a vision and system perspective, the boring side of creative probably. And I really wanted that outlet and to create something. So in the first startup, it was just, I'm a techie who can't actually release anything to the market because I don't have the skills, but someone said, do you want to work together and make this? I'll design it, you build it, and we'll see where it goes. And we just set up a site together. It wasn't ever intended to be a good business, but it just ended up doing quite well and eventually getting acquired. But during that, I had started to learn quite a lot. So I was like, okay, I want to now do something that's actually a good business that I believe in. Because the other one, it's kind of, I couldn't ever even see there being an exit. And it was bizarre that we managed to get one, which was, I'm not complaining. But the second business, someone approached me with an idea. And I said, that's a bit of a bad idea, but if we adapt it this way, it could be a really good idea. So we were kind of equals in that, but he knew the industry, so I kind of played second fiddle to it. And then on this one, it was kind of like, well, I guess I know the industry. I feel like I have all of the skills. So I've kind of evolved to that point where I felt comfortable. And I think coming into this one, my weaknesses were the sales, marketing, and probably charisma and personality. Like I didn't feel like I could sell a product to someone because I'm not a salesperson, and I'll come across as some geeky developer or something like that. And maybe that's what you're thinking now. But
this Andy Jones talking.
this was the Andy Jones. Yeah. I don't want to sound as like it was a rebranding. It wasn't quite that. But that said, I've never been massively keen on being called Andy, and I wasn't called it all through school, so it's not really felt like a big change in name either.
Yeah, Vann's a pretty cool middle name, to be fair. My middle name's Clive John. Not very exciting.
That's all right.
And what has been your biggest struggle then?
The biggest struggle has been building a system like this. The reason why people haven't done it isn't necessarily the lack of realizing that there's an opportunity. It's really bloody difficult. Like we're sort of competing with many companies who focus loads of time on one specific bit, and we're trying to do all of those specific bits and hold them together. And we're really, really strong technically, so we're actually being able to do it for the most part. And also, like, even though, like, what these other things are missing is that they're not held together, which is a huge flaw, which we don't have. So I'd say the biggest difficulty has been the barrier of entry. Like, if someone wanted to build a property management system, I would almost advise them not to, unless they really, like, it doesn't make sense as a quick tech business. Like, this company is either going to be worth a huge amount or close to nothing. Like, it's a gamble. So it's very difficult. And that's probably the hardest challenge, is that I really want to build everything quickly. I almost wish I could just pause the world for like a year and just have a year building everything. And also, we really listen to our audience, and it's really important to me to feel like we're responding and we're building what people want. So we're trying to balance up the business side of things, so the things that's going to make us money and grow our audience, with the things that's going to make the product more robust, with the things that people just want as a nice little feature. So, like, trying to make sure that we're balancing those three things together is really tricky.
Okay. So what sort of top tips would you give any budding tech startup entrepreneurs who are thinking about, doing something similar in their given field, or even a business that's thinking about creating their own system within their business? What tips would you give them to avoid catastrophic failure?
I think anyone who's looking to build an HMO property management system, my tip would be don't all crush you. Not really. Funny to sound a bit aggressive. No, anyone who's looking to build a prop tech company, I'd say one of the things people really, really kind of don't put enough focus on is how you're going to get it to market, what the value is to your customers, and whether like how you can acquire users more cheaply than you'll make in their lifetime. Like, just, I know that's just like the real basics, but it's just things people don't seem to think about. People recognize a problem, and there's loads of times, like I advise quite a lot of people, and there's loads of times people come over with an idea that's like, this would be a really good idea. And it's like, it would be a good idea, but it won't ever exist because there's not a market, or it'll cost you too much to even make people aware of it. There's loads of good ideas that just will never get made because there's no business there.
Yeah.
So I'd say really recognizing the business and not getting so hung up on the tech side. Like, techies really have this problem where it's like it has to all be completely perfect, and really you just have to compartmentalize things and sort of modularize things, so it doesn't all have to be perfect, but as the seams start to split, you can get in there and easily fix it. Like, your foundations have to be absolutely solid, but it's almost like in the sort of property development style, like you have to build the building completely perfectly, but the decoration inside, you can paint the wall if it doesn't look very good, and you can like move the sofa, that's fine. Like, don't get so hung up on the what is it, feng shui of a room. Like, focus on the business, I'd say.
Okay, and what advice would you give anybody who's just starting out in business, generally, not necessarily just in prop tech?
Yeah, probably that. I also think it's also good to surround yourself by creative people who are doing similar things. I think co-working spaces are really good for that. Don't think of this is how things are done, so this is how I should do things. You're way better just throwing that away, and like, don't look at how things are done. Look at how you do things right now, if you knew nothing else, and then take a look at how things are done and see if you've missed anything. So like offices, a lot of the time it doesn't make sense to have an office for startups, at least, but people sort of play business at times and think, well, I won't be taken seriously without an office. And then you just have to weigh up the ROI. Like, is it worth spending X when that X can go on marketing? So I'd probably say, yeah, don't just do things because you see them being done. Properly think about everything you're doing, otherwise you're just recreating what else exists.
Always think about the return on investment for every decision you make within your business.
Yeah.
If there's anybody listening who is young and impressionable, or parents of anybody who's young and impressionable who really like the sound of becoming a software developer, what was it that you studied at university?
Yeah, so I went to university and did software engineering, but I didn't learn software engineering. I think you're much better. I don't care when I hire people whether they've got a degree or not. All I care about is the soft skills. Are they someone who is going to listen and is going to understand the problem, and is going to sort of challenge my assumptions on things? Like, that is really important, particularly with software developers who are quite binary in their thinking. It's very black and white, and the world is completely full of grays. So I would say, if someone's looking to get into software development, the best place to start is working on projects. You'll learn so much more working on projects than trying to study software. Like, just jump into an open source project and see if you can push it forward, or look for a friend who's got an idea and wants to partner with you on something, and just do it. You'll learn so much just building something, even if it's rubbish.
Without this sort of university education, then where would they learn the skills? How would they get started to get the basics?
The internet is completely full of where to learn things for coding. There's like Code Academy. There's so many YouTubers and Twitch streamers teaching to code. And I'd say like that's better than a university education, which is usually a few years behind anyway. Like, I learned a language called Java and PHP at university, both of those over the past sort of 10 years have definitely fallen out of favor. Even at university, they were kind of on the way out, I'd say. But yeah, I think there's enough resource online. I think it really lends itself to picking up and learning. It's kind of like we talked a bit about business studies, but you learn so much more in running a business than you'll ever learn from studying a business. And I think the studying, the bit that it's really useful is it opens you up to understanding other people's experiences, which is hugely important as well. Like, it's kind of that saying of like, don't learn from your own mistakes if you can learn from others.
Yeah.
Like, you really need like a balance of the two things. Like, yeah. So I'd say learn online and, you know, do some formal education to really improve yourself after. But as a base point, I think you can't learn to code without really being interested in learning to code.
Yeah, you've got to have a kind of a desire to want to learn, because it sounds quite complicated. So if anybody listening to this is wanting to work with you, what opportunities have people got to work with you? What are your sort of shameless plugs at this point?
So if you run HMOs or single lets and you want something that's a little bit more modern and really sort of pushing forward on things, you can go to coho.life, Life, or if it's easier to remember, coho.management. And we've kind of built this little tool that means you don't have to sit with one of us and have someone demo the system. You can just click and it will load you into an account as if it's your friend's account. You can click and add people to rooms and message them and change the rent and log rents and log maintenance. You can do all that without one of us watching you. And from that point, you can decide if you want to use it. Our teams will fully migrate you across from whatever existing software you're on. So there'll be no real downtime. There'll be no headache in moving system that way. So yeah, we've really tried to make it seamless. Coho.life.
I'll include links in the description as well, for anybody who wants to connect. So in terms of social media, if people want to get in touch and follow you, where are the best places for them to find you?
I'm pretty Googleable, Vann with 2 N's, Vogstad. Yeah, always keen to talk to people, and that's basically where I've got all of my knowledge from. So I love people to connect and message me and stuff like that. So you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, and please do.
Yeah, Instagram?
I am, yeah, but I don't post there that much.
Well, I've had a really, really good time listening to you. I've learned a lot. Very, very valuable contribution. So I just want to say thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. Wish you all the best with Coho, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the HMO Awards develop. I'll definitely be nominating my business and myself for some of your awards. So obviously remember me when you're doing the judgments. But that's it. So that was the Evolution of a Property Business podcast, and I'll see you guys in the next interview.